You learned very early that silence was safer than speaking. Not because anyone told you this directly, but because you felt what happened when you used your voice. The way the room changed, the way tension entered spaces that had been calm, the way your words seemed to create problems rather than solve them. So you stopped offering them. This didn't happen in a single moment. It happened across hundreds of small interactions where you reached out with your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, and something in the response told you it would have been better if you hadn't. Maybe it was a sigh. Maybe it was a look of exhaustion. Maybe it was the way the conversation shifted immediately to someone else, as if what you'd said hadn't registered at all. Or maybe it was louder than that. Maybe your words were met with anger, with dismissal, with correction. Maybe you learned that speaking up meant conflict, and conflict meant you were the problem, that your voice didn't add to the conversation, it disrupted it. Children are extraordinarily attuned to the emotional climate around them. They don't need to be told explicitly that they're too much, too loud, too needy. They can feel it in the quality of attention they receive, in the way adults turn toward them or turn away, in the space that opens up for them to speak, or the space that closes before they've finished their sentence. And when a child senses, again and again, that their voice creates tension rather than connection, they make a logical adaptation. They go quiet. This is how a child disappears, not by leaving, but by learning to take up less and less space until they're present, but somehow not there, until they've become so practiced at silence that people forget they have anything to say. You probably remember what this felt like, sitting at the dinner table with something you wanted to share and feeling the words die in your throat before you could speak them, not because someone stopped you, but because you'd already learned to stop yourself. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, a warning signal fired. Speaking up is dangerous. Psychologists call this learned helplessness, though that term doesn't quite capture the intelligence of what you were doing. You weren't helpless, you were adapting. You were learning the rules of your environment and adjusting your behavior to stay safe within it. You were protecting yourself the only way a child knows how, by becoming smaller, quieter, less of a presence that might trigger discomfort in the people you depended on. But here's what that adaptation cost you. It cost you the sense that your thoughts mattered, that your feelings were valid, that you had a right to take up space in a conversation, in a room, in the world. Without realizing it, you internalized the message that your voice was a burden, that the safest version of you was the silent version. And you carried that belief forward year after year until it became so automatic you stopped noticing you were doing it. Now, decades later, you still go quiet, not because anyone is actively silencing you, but because your nervous system remembers. It remembers that speaking up once led to disconnection, to tension, to the terrible feeling of being too much. And so it protects you the way it always has, by keeping you silent. You're in a meeting, and you have an idea, but you don't share it. You tell yourself it's probably not that good anyway, that someone else will say it better, that it's not worth interrupting for. But really, beneath all those rational explanations, there's an old fear. The fear that your voice will be met with the same subtle rejection it once was. That you'll speak and create that familiar discomfort, and everyone will wish you'd just stayed quiet. You're with friends, and the conversation flows around you, and you have something to contribute. But you wait. You wait for the perfect moment, the right opening, the invitation that never quite comes. And by the time you've decided it's safe to speak, the conversation has moved on. And you tell yourself it doesn't matter, that what you were going to say wasn't important anyway. But there's a small ache in that, a familiar loneliness in being present but unheard. You're in a relationship and something bothers you, something you need to address, but you swallow it. You convince yourself it's not a big deal, that bringing it up would just create conflict, that it's easier to let it go. But letting it go means carrying it, means adding it to the collection of unspoken things you've been accumulating your whole life, means staying quiet while resentment builds in the silence. This is what happens when a child learns that their voice is unwelcome, They grow into an adult who has a voice but doesn't use it, who has thoughts and feelings and needs but has learned to keep them internal, who watches life happen around them, contributing when it's safe, when it's invited, when it's absolutely necessary, but rarely just because they have something to say. And the cruelest part of this pattern is that it's self-reinforcing. Because the longer you stay quiet, the harder it becomes to speak. Your silence becomes your identity. People get used to you as the quiet one, the one who doesn't need much, the one who's easy because they never ask for anything, never complain, never make waves. And when you finally do speak up, when you finally try to use your voice after years of keeping it small, it feels wrong. It feels like you're being too loud, too demanding, too much, even when you're just being normal, even when you're just doing what other people do naturally all the time. Because your baseline for what's acceptable got set so low, you learned that even a normal amount of self-expression was too much. So now anything beyond silence feels like an imposition. What saved you then now imprisons you. The ability to go quiet, to not need attention, to manage your own feelings without burdening anyone else, these were skills that helped you survive an environment where your voice wasn't welcomed. But now they keep you isolated. They keep you unknown. They keep you carrying things alone that you were never meant to carry alone. And here's what makes this so difficult to change. The people in your life now didn't teach you to be quiet. They don't know they're benefiting from your silence. They don't realize that your easy, undemanding presence is actually the result of years of learning to suppress yourself. They think you're just naturally quiet, naturally independent, naturally unbothered by the things that bother other people. They don't see the effort it takes, the constant internal monitoring, the way you're always editing yourself, always deciding that what you want to say isn't worth saying, that what you need isn't worth asking for. So they don't think to invite you in. They don't think to ask what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you need, because you've trained them through years of silence that you don't need to be asked, that you're fine, that you'll speak up if something's really important. But the truth is, you won't. Because by the time something feels important enough to speak about, you've already been carrying it for so long that it feels too big to bring up, too complicated to explain, too likely to be dismissed or minimized or met with that same subtle rejection that taught you to be quiet in the first place. And so the silence continues, and the loneliness deepens, because you're surrounded by people who know you but don't really know you, who interact with the quiet version you present, but never get to see what's underneath, who would probably be surprised to learn how much you're holding, how much you're feeling, how much you have to say. This is the legacy of learning to stay quiet. Not that you can't speak, but that you've forgotten you're allowed to. That somewhere along the way, you internalized the belief that your voice doesn't matter, that other people's comfort is more important than your expression, that the safest way to exist is to not exist too loudly. But here's what you need to understand about that child who learned to be quiet. They weren't quiet because they had nothing to say. They were quiet because they learned that saying it wasn't safe. They had thoughts, feelings, needs, desires, fears, all the things that make someone human. They just learned to keep them hidden. And you still have them, all those unspoken things, all those thoughts you've never shared, those feelings you've never expressed, those needs you've never voiced. They didn't disappear just because you stopped speaking them out loud. They're still there, accumulating in the silence, waiting. The question is whether you're ready to remember that your voice matters, not because someone else validated it, not because you've earned the right to speak, but simply because you're a person and people get to have voices. You learned to be quiet because you were intelligent enough to read your environment and adapt to it, because you were sensitive enough to notice the impact your voice had and caring enough to adjust yourself to keep the peace. Not because you were weak, but because you were human, because you needed connection, needed belonging, and silence seemed like the price you had to pay for it. But the cost of that silence is that nobody really knows you. And maybe you don't really know yourself anymore either. Maybe you've been quiet for so long that you're not even sure what you think, what you feel, what you need. Maybe your own voice has become unfamiliar to you. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the first step isn't speaking louder or speaking more. Maybe it's just noticing the silence. Noticing how often you stop yourself. Noticing the weight of all the things you're not saying. Noticing the loneliness of being present but unheard. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to suddenly become someone who speaks up easily, who takes up space without fear, who voices every thought and feeling. You just have to see it for what it is. You learned to stay quiet because staying quiet kept you safe. And it worked. You survived. You adapted. You learned to carry things alone, to need less, to be the easy one. But you're tired now. Tired of monitoring, tired of editing, tired of carrying all these unspoken things. Tired of being the quiet one when really you just learned to be quiet. And maybe, eventually, you'll find spaces where your voice is welcomed, where speaking up doesn't create tension but creates connection, where your thoughts and feelings and needs are met with interest rather than irritation, where you don't have to earn the right to be heard. But until then, you can at least know this: your silence isn't your nature, it's your adaptation. And you're allowed to be tired of it.